when you first learned that Aaron Sorkin wants to adapt your book as a screenplay.
Yeah, I mean,
and were you surprised when you found out that basically, were you surprised that Social Network, that David Fincher did such an incredible job and that it was nominated for, almost won Best Picture?
Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that King's Speech happened.
It should have won for Best
Right,
Picture. The only problem is the Weinstein brothers snuck it.
They know what they're doing. I will say, the whole process of the Social Network was an amazing situation. So I basically was sitting at home before the 21 Vegas premiere. So we had our premiere for the movie 21 in Las Vegas, and it was a week before that. And I basically got an email at 2 in the morning, and it was a Harvard senior, and he said, my best friend co-founded Facebook, and no one's ever heard of him. So I essentially went to a bar in Boston called Bar 10 in the West End, and in walks Eduardo Saverin. And it was just like the movie. He looked kind of like Andrew Garfield, not as good looking as Andrew Garfield, but similar looking. And he walked in and he sits down and he starts the conversation by saying, Mark Zuckerberg, well, he said, I don't know, it's a nice crowd, I don't want to say the F word, but it's fine. He said, Mark Zuckerberg fucked me.
We'll call it.
Okay, Mark Zuckerberg fucked me. That's how he started the conversation, and I was like, well, this is an interesting conversation. And he proceeded to tell me the story, basically the story behind the Social Network. And I was kind of blown away. I was like, this is cool. Facebook was not yet huge. It was like 100 million members, but it was still something everybody was kind of talking about. So I started to research it, and I spent about 6 months hanging out with Eduardo.
So you get this email just out of clear blue from somebody.
From his best friend at Harvard.
And did you know this guy at all?
No, the guy was a fan of my book, Bringing Down the House. So I started hanging out with Eduardo. Eduardo started dating my wife's best friend. We were like, very close. This is what I do when I write a book. I become very close to my characters. Over the course of that 6 months, I found the Winklevi twins. I don't know if they're here. They're very easy to find. They're two giant identical twin Olympic rowers. It's like, if they didn't exist, Hollywood would have created them. They're perfect. I met Sean Parker. But I was being kind of secretive about what I was doing. I wrote a 14-page book proposal. And I sent it to my agent. And the book proposal leaked onto the internet on Gawker. Gawker published my book proposal. And everything kind of exploded at once. So Eduardo had actually...
Take a step back.
Yeah.
How does Gawker get it?
Well, I'm not sure. I think what happened is my agent sent it to a few publishers, and there was a bidding, and then the publisher didn't get it. That's what I think, but I have no way of knowing. I mean, David, you might know more about this world than I do, being in the publishing world, but somehow it leaked onto the internet. When it got onto the internet, everything kind of happened at once. Eduardo had actually come to me to try and force Facebook to settle with him. He was in the midst of this massive lawsuit. He wasn't supposed to be talking to anybody. Facebook did settle as soon as they saw my proposal, trying to get him to stop talking to me. So they gave him $4 billion. And the top of the settlement agreement says, you may never speak to Ben Mezrich again. So, I mean, listen, for $4 billion, I would never speak to me again. He sent a legal restraining order. He moved to Singapore. He broke up with my wife's friend. He literally cut us all off and disappeared. I haven't ever seen or spoken to Eduardo since.
So basically, you're back on ground zero now.
But I had all this information because I spent 6 months with him. Zuckerberg freaked out and was like, what are you writing about? They tried to stop it. But the same day, Aaron Sorkin saw this and said, I want to write this as my next movie. David Fincher saw it as well and said, I want to direct this as my next movie.
So they see the 14-page
proposal. And so they basically...
And hold on a second.
Yeah.
What is in 14 pages that you can't say in one page?
I mean, 14 pages...
That's almost a little novella.
I think that my main skill in life is these 14-page treatments. So I write this treatment, and it's pretty much a selling tool in terms of movies and books, and it becomes everything else. But basically, it all exploded. But Fincher said, I want to make it right now, because who knows if Facebook will be around in a year. And this was all great, except for I hadn't actually written a book yet. So I basically locked myself in a room, and I wrote that book over 3 months. And Sorkin came to Boston, and I was handing him chapters as I went, and he turned into this amazing screenplay. But you never think a story about Facebook is going to be this incredible movie. I mean, I remember my mom's first instinct when I sent her the proposal. She's like, no one's going to watch a movie about Facebook. And Kevin Spacey, who was one of the first readers, him and Dana at Trigger Street read it and were like, I don't know if I see a movie here. So everyone had the same opinion except for Fincher and Sorkin.
Did Fincher ever sit you down and just pick your brain before you
Yes,
started?
so he came out to Boston and we went to dinner. And he's an amazing individual. I mean, he's dark and scary and all this kind of stuff. A Fincher movie set is not a fun movie set. It was one of those situations where, for instance, there was one scene we shot at Harvard where it's literally just a bus pulling up to a finals club. And it's a 3-second scene. 3 people get out of the bus. He shot that scene from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. It was 12 straight hours of shooting one 3-second scene over. And that's the way he makes movies. And it's just horrifying, and yet it comes out awesome. So it was great talking to him. Him and Sorkin I spent a lot of time with. Yeah, it ended up being a wonderful movie.